One of the great luxuries that a franchise like Terminator allows you is you can simply just cast the best actor for the role. So we have a massive international cast. Kyle Reese and John Connor are both from Australia. Sarah's from the UK. Dayo's actually from Africa. J.K. Simmons will walk around saying he's the lone American in the movie. If one of those guys happened to be American, they still would have gotten the job, but it just wasn't who the best person for the role was.
The whole cast has been easy. It's we all get on, and a lot of that is, back to Arnold. We've got a guy there that, we're all here because of. Terminator worked largely because of Jim Cameron and his story, but Arnold was just it was just brilliant casting.
You can't do a Terminator without Arnold. You just can't. He's the first thing that comes to your mind when you think of all of the movies.
There's that poster of him with a gun, and to me, it's so iconic, and he became such an icon in the part. So, I think we're very lucky to have him as part of our story.
The first time I met Arnold, we were doing a table read with most of the cast and all the producers, the big giant square table, and we're chatting and getting to know each other. Arnold came in and sat down, and obviously he's a big guy physically, but he walks into a room and he just brings a presence and a charisma with him that's undeniable.
Old, but not obsolete.
It was pretty special for me at the table read when we were hearing the script out loud for the first time, and he said some very famous words.
I'll be back.
That was one of those moments where it was just like, shit, yep, there it is. There they are. Perhaps three of the most, iconic words in cinematic history.
I mean, I had to get him the other day to do Sarah Connor, because just the way he does it, it's just so funny.
I'm back. To me, Terminator has been an extremely important franchise because I remember when I did the first Terminator, it was really the first action movie where I didn't have to take off my clothes. I mean, I did take it off just for a few minutes, but the rest of the movie was with clothes. It was like with my leather pants on, or jeans, or leather jacket and T-shirt and all this. And the body was not the most important thing because the machine actually was the most important thing. So to me, this was an important breakthrough in my career because everyone thought that I can only do Hercules movies or to do Conan type of movies, where you need a little iron cloth and flex your muscles, and that was it. So here was the first movie where I, kind of did the movie all the way through with clothes on, and where it was acting, and where I was not only playing a hero like I did in the past, but I played a villain. But the villain that was kind of heroic, so it was kind of a mishmash of different things. It was really terrific and a great breakthrough for my career. After that came Commando and Red Heat and Predator and True Lies and all of those kind of things. The rest, of course, is history.
One of the first people we cast, besides Arnold, was Emilia as Sarah. And the nice thing for me was I had a history with her in Game of Thrones. When I came to the project, Skydance was already very excited about her in the role.
Look, everybody in our world is a Game of Thrones fan. So saying, hey, what about Emilia Clarke? It wasn't much of a stretch.
And action.
Look, it's obvious. She's beautiful, but she's also a badass. And that's an interesting but also difficult combination to find in an actress.
How is he?
Still breathing.
Good. And you should be able to mate with Kyle Reese in this timeline.
Oh, okay, we're not having this conversation again.
We had to run a casting process as you always do, and it was really, really simple. She came in and read, and everybody looked at it and was like, that's it, that's Sarah. Her dedication to this role, the emotional depths, the charm, the humor, but also just the incredible strength. It makes her a very different Sarah Connor than we've seen, but she's absolutely fantastic in this movie.
My brother made me watch, made me watch Terminator far too young. I just kind of fell in love with it, and it was always something that I wasn't meant to watch, so there was this kind of excitement surrounding it. Like, you're not gonna say no to Sarah Connor. You know what I mean? You're just not. She's such an incredible icon for women everywhere, and just an opportunity to play such a fierce, strong warrior and put a new spin on it like we have was just incredible and incredibly exciting.
I didn't know she's that famous when I first met her, but a lot of my Korean friends text me from Korea, please take some picture with her. So I didn't ask her yet, but today I finally asked her and she said, yeah.
And then we set about trying to find Kyle Reese, and chemistry was a huge part of it.
I think there was a temptation to go out and find a Michael Biehn and say, let's do that again. Because it was like Linda Hamilton, he so nailed what he had to do in the first movie. But after a while, as you work on the material, this is a different take on the character. We're exploring different things, and we then just set out to find the best guy for the role.
I had the privilege of working with Jai a couple years ago on Jack Reacher, which is a movie we did with Tom Cruise, where he played a very different character. He played the villain of the film.
This is insane. All of it. This is not the mission.
Yeah, well,
We really actually ran a completely open casting process. Jai came in, and we actually questioned a little bit, does he have the range to play such a drastically different character? And he came in and tested with Emilia, and I remember me and Dana and Alan, we all looked at ourselves and went, that's Kyle. Just, he was simply the best actor for the job.
You die, all right?
What?
You die, that's what happens.
I went back and watched the first two films, definitely, more of just for a reference point, but I didn't place an enormous amount of emphasis on trying to draw from the performance of Michael Biehn or anything like that. It was just, he's the character, that's great, let's enjoy the narrative. It's just fun to kind of look back and think of what the mission was when we saw it once upon a time. And so, with shifting that, it's interesting to kind of just play a different side of it.
The main reason I decided to do this movie was because my 12-year-old daughter is in love with Jai Courtney. And I said, okay, I'll go work with him. You can come to the set if you want. Jai did a little birthday video for her 13th birthday saying hi to her. So she will be, that's next week that I will get to play that for her. I will be Mr. Super Dad. Yeah, that'll be big.
We fight for those that have died. We fight for those who will die tonight.
John Connor, we knew, was going to be one of the hardest roles to cast because he has to be charismatic. He has to be a guy who people who have no hope look at, and he is their hope. Not literally, but figuratively, he is their Messiah.
Jason Clarke plays our John Connor, and it's a character he was able to do both of those. And I'd just seen him in Planet of the Apes, but the film that made us all fall in love with him was probably Zero Dark 30, and we were very lucky to get him.
Jason Clarke is just one of those brilliant actors who can play simply any range.
We don't know what's going to happen next.
There's a big reveal scene in the parking structure, and Arnold actually came up to me at the end of the day and was like, David, Jason's really good. And I was like, yes, I know he is.
I do not have sufficient data to answer the question.
And that's the problem with machines, no imagination.
I mean, Jason was just so powerful with his speeches, so lofty, so strong inside. He never felt kind of intimidated by the Terminator or anything else, no matter what the challenges were. So I just thought he was terrific.
It's a very enigmatic but captured guy, a man who's a messiah and has a future to fulfill to save the world, but then he's trapped in that destiny and in that world that he's been born into, and then you still didn't really know that much about him, about how he truly felt about everything that was going underneath. And I think that was a big key point for the writers and for David in figuring out why they wanted to do this, and I think John lies at the heart of it, about the man and machine.
I feel like I'm just making a movie with a bunch of friends because we got to work with Byung-Hun on G.I. Joe. When you think about Robert Patrick's performance, there was just something, it was a walking nightmare constantly coming at you. And the specifics of his physicality and the way he moves, the way he attacks, it's literally a nightmare that's never stopping.
It looks easy on the surface because you're not talking that much, and it's really difficult because you have to move in a way that is specific but yet different and creepy and scary all at the same time. And we knew from G.I. Joe that he had that in spades.
No idea if he'll want to do it. And
Friends call me Terminator as a nickname because they thought I look like him, and also I was the champion of arm wrestling, so they call me Terminator. So it's kind of a coincidence to get so it was really great.
Literally, we wanted somebody who has a quality to him that actually feels slightly inhuman, because what he is playing is the personification of Skynet. He is 100% machine, but also an incredibly complicated artificial intelligence.
And we chased Matt Smith down. I mean, I'm not gonna lie, I'd love to say, like, we asked him and he was like, sure, I'm gonna do it. No, we hunted him down to make him be in this movie.
It actually took a lot of conversations, as he will actually tell you. It was his mother who eventually said, "You're an idiot if you don't do this," that actually got him to say yes, after he had said no about 3 times, and despite impassioned emails, and I promise you'll be happy you did this.
And action!
I think one of the funniest days on this set was the day it was announced that Matt Smith was going to be in this movie, because he coincidentally was here doing hair and makeup, and it felt like the internet went crazy. And now, having spent some time with Matt Smith, I can understand why.
One of the great draws for me, really, was to play someone that was villainous, because if I look at my career, that's been something that I've always wanted to do, and to get to do it in a franchise like this. I'm 31 now. Sort of growing up in the 80s, I think for anyone who's about my age, the first 2 movies were seminal films, really, and I think they were just really ahead of their time.
As when he was a white supremacist, and he's just a joy. JK it's lucky and wonderful for us to be able to watch him win an Academy Award while we're finishing the movie, but it just confirms what we already knew.
That we spotted early what the rest of the world caught on to, which is the sort of stunning combination of the ability to be very light and comic, and also to have a lot of depth and understanding, and to have a kind of a performance. I mean, Whiplash is...
I honestly, was not looking to do this kind of movie right now, but there was an inquiry, and I said, let me see the script, and I read the script, and I thought, this is really great. And then I saw, all the people that were involved, and Arnold was back, and the way they deal with Arnold being however much older he is than he was in the first one, and the new actors that they've brought in, and the script, it was just a slam dunk, so I jumped on board.
That JK wrote on set himself.
Yeah.
I mean, let's be honest, some of the best stuff, the door line.
Yeah.
That's the new breacher. Big blast, no shrapnel, blows the door clean off. For people who can't do that themselves.
JK got the character. He understood how much fun the character could be, what the role was, why he was there, how important he was in the story. He immediately understood that both the weight and the lightness that the character could provide, and lent into it in the best way.
We were so lucky.
Yeah. No, we were thrilled to have him in the movie.
Yeah. Actors have egos. We all do, But this team, everybody's here wanting to make the best movie they can and contribute to it. And Arnold is, the most gregarious, fun guy to just hang out with on the set, and then they call action, and boom, he's the guardian, and he knocks it out of the park. And then you hang out and have a good time. And it's been a very relaxed, fun atmosphere.
I'd never been to New Orleans before, and I was surprised at the fact that I completely fell in love with it and, want to move there. And there's something about that city that is just glorious. I mean, if you're going to be on location somewhere that's pretending not to be itself, it's great to be in a city that has a wonderful culture and spirit.
It's a great town because it's such a film town now, because there's so many movies that shoot there. So you actually want to work hard to make sure that you have a distinctive look. And found, a combination of incredible sets that Neil built on our stages, that many of which were out at the NASA site, and then practical locations in and around town.
Especially 1980s downtown Los Angeles, downtown New Orleans is kind of stuck in another time period, so it actually looks more like downtown. There wasn't a ton of location work. There was a lot of outdoor work, but it was more like parking lots. We shot the Future War very early in the shooting schedule, and we went right into 6 weeks of nights, and that was a big part of it. And we shot in this giant part of the Port of Orleans, and the set was about a quarter mile long. So we had an enormous moon box suspended by a crane, enormous set pieces that Neil designed sections of the wall of the Future War camp.
There were glimpses of the Future War in Cameron's first two movies, and he was such an efficient storyteller that he did very little there. He also, I think, wasn't trying to spend money where he didn't have to spend money. I was excited that we got to develop some of the things he'd already created. There's, wonderful weapons like the hunter killers and the spider tanks that are all got to actually spend time, with some gritty, full production of what it would be like to be in that kind of battle.
There was so much pyro and atmosphere and extras and endoskeletons. We flipped the go with the truck. It was a big handoff between the first unit and the second unit, but all the things with the actors leading into and coming out of each stunt or event was shot by the first unit. It was a real close collaboration between the art department and the lighting department and everybody else, stunts, effects, pyro, actors, directors.
It's basically D-Day, and you see literally the Resistance throw everything that they've got at Skynet, and it is a massive...
The Griffith Park sequence was, tremendously involved in recreating actual Griffith Park in New Orleans in a parking lot. It's surreal to see it all put together.
With Arnold, I think there was a turning point for everybody. For me, I knew he had to be in the movie, but I'd never met him. And I remember having breakfast with him the first time and having no idea what kind of person I was going to be meeting. He's a movie star forever. He's an action star forever. He was governor. I have no idea what kind of human being that's going to lead to. And the first line I crossed was realizing that he's wonderful to be around. He's open and sensible and funny, and not just my first breakfast with him, but then with the crew, seeing him laugh, and he always eats lunch with the crew. He's completely unpretentious that way.
One of my favorite moments was when we were shooting the Griffith Park Observatory the very first night, and it's Arnold's reveal in the movie where he pulls his hoodie back and he says, "I've been waiting for you."
Ready and answer.
I've been waiting.
And you actually got to look around at the entire crew. The age range is early 20s to 60, and everybody's just grinning ear to ear because the Terminator is on set.
Take and action.
I've been waiting for you.
It's the thing he was born to do. And he's phenomenal at it. And it was like all of a sudden you were stepping back in time and remembering where you were, both for T1 and T2, every time Arnold walked on screen.
Except now, because of the visual effects that you can do, and because of the technology that's available, you can tell that story even better.
What was really challenging about it is the Guardian in 1984 is, 20 plus years younger than Arnold himself. We actually scoured the earth to find basically a bodybuilder by the name of Brett. He was the only person who had that 50-inch back that Arnold actually had, but his biceps and quads, everything else was slightly lesser than. And then obviously that served as really our proxy. So when you shoot the fight sequence, Arnold and basically everyone has something to interact with.
It's wonderful. To me, it reminds me sort of the encounter between the T-1000 and Arnold in T2, where they first face each other, and there's something just fun about watching these two things that have the massive Mack trucks going at each other. So it's a human scale fight with punches being thrown, but each one is, like a pile driver. The fight tilts in one direction because, let's face it, our Guardian's been around a little longer and he's starting to show some wear and tear.
Get to the moment that Kyle Reese returns to 1984. Oh my God, are they really just remaking the first movie but with a bigger Future War sequence? Why would they do that? And the reality is we're not. But we are pretty meticulously recreating that initial 1984 sequence. Again, it's not a...
Come with me if you want to live.
Sometimes we felt like, oh God, we have to shoot this way because look, that's how it was done before. We had to find the right balance of how much we were recreating them exactly and how much we were sort of doing our versions of them. But it was fun to do that, and it's been fun to watch audiences respond to them, especially, you know, the fans that really get them. And occasionally we go shot by shot, you know, to the original movie, and feeling the fans react to that has been really fun. Because, you know, the broader audience may not understand exactly what the reference is, but the fans, there's a wonderful sort of laugh, you know, that you feel in the audience.
Set and action.
3, 2, 1, go! Come with me if you want to live. Now, soldier.
And we cut.
Cut.
An abandoned power plant.
We in New Orleans, and that particular building has so much richness and character and age. Just a great sort of old abandoned feeling to it. It also needed to be able to hold the armored truck, be big enough for an interesting fight.
How do you even describe that building? It sort of has a roof.
Yes, it was basically, it was an abandoned power station. And it was kind of falling apart, and we actually had a horrible day where we got rained out, and there was literally a monsoon that came in, and we were like, well, we're inside, we're gonna be fine. And there were holes in the roof.
No.
And so the whole thing—
It was about 3 feet of water.
Yeah. And then after that, we're like, well, great, we'll go to the cover set, but all the trucks had sunk into the mud at the power station. So literally me and Dana were sitting in our trailers till about 3 a.m. till we were finally like, this is not going to stop. We are not going to shoot today.
And for the record, it was forecast for scattered showers.
Yes.
Getting Byung-Hun Lee to play the T-1000 was fantastic. He took it so seriously. He was so focused on getting the choreography right for this character. He was correcting me occasionally when I would suggest something, and he would say, I don't think he would do that, because he'd really thought about it. And I think he's achieved some of the things that Robert Patrick achieved in the, in T2, which sort of set the bar for this kind of creature. He's physically beautiful, he's graceful, he's elegant, but he's lethal and scary.
Sound speed. Hey, Mark.
I watched T2 again. Actually, I watched it a lot. And it was still so fun. And I try to be like him.
Sarah, go.
Action-wise, it was so different because I've never acted not as a human, as a machine. I couldn't blink, I couldn't breathe.
Action.
It was just such a perfect fit. He was like, performed just like a machine. Is he really a machine, or what's going on here? Because he was so good and so precise. He would do 10 takes, and he would hit not a millimeter away from the mark every single time. I talked to him at one point, and he told me that he believes, like I do, in reps, because he comes from the athletic background, and so it's all about reps, doing it over and over in order to be precise.
As soon as I got here, production introduced me the movement coach. I thought I was gonna meet, some action coordinator or a stunt guy, but Nito, he's basically a dancer. So I was a little surprised by that, but he was really good for my movements, and he helped me a lot.
Neil built enormous set pieces. The tunnels, the interior was all beautiful sets built by Neil and conceived by Neil, as if there were tunnels underneath this power plant.
Here we go. And action.
So you set a trap.
Had to. Can't leave any future tech behind when we go.
Go. Go where?
The TDD that is in 1984. I wanted it to feel like, that we would believe we were underneath that building.
I think that the board form concrete is really a beautiful job. The scenic work in here is really nice, feels great, feels dank, feels, you know, underground. I think the electromagnets are pretty great on this. The copper tubing and the sort of mismatched sizes of it, and you know how it feels organized in a disorganized kind of way. I think that's what we were trying to do with the Guardian. All of the computer equipment is early 80s Apple and computers. Well, one of the rules of time travel is that you have to be in a cold room. They're really refrigeration units, and we got them from a bunch of various junkyards, and there they are. Some are radiators, actually.
We can't be wearing anything?
Yeah, I know how time travel works. Sarah.
The number of arms and how they work, the number of rings and how they spin, the way that a person is lifted the other sets. So,
in regards to really being a film-friendly town in New Orleans, something we could never do anywhere but New Orleans is the freeway arrival sequence. We literally kind of had this dream of, well, let's shut down the largest overpass in New Orleans and shoot on it for 3 nights. You know, you couldn't do that in New York or San Francisco, and New Orleans was like, absolutely. We'll shut the whole thing down for you. It'll be fine. You can bring your crews on there. And we kind of looked at each other and we're like, they're really gonna let us do this?
3 days.
This is great. And so, so again, that sequence has that.
All right, let's go. I'll get us out of here. Stay close.
Wait. We all know they can shapeshift. If you are John, prove it.
Sarah! No, she's right, Kyle. She is.
Jason Clarke, playing John Connor, is an incredibly dynamic actor, and that's what this particular version of John Connor really requires.
Jason is just so intense in his portrayal of John that it's much less about gunfire than it is about the physicality of what he created, because it's not quite human.
And it's sort of the power of charisma, and you see that in the beginning. The charismatic leader who you know, what happens if you take a Messiah and you push him, you know, you let him fall from grace in a way that inflicts him to be on the other side? What is that point of view?
Ready, and action. John!
Well, I always look at a character from, you know, what he's doing is right in his own mind. And you know, I think John's agenda and his decision about what's happened to him is very justified. You know, in terms of he believes that the only way to break this cycle is to not just side with the machine, but become part of the machine.
Let him go. Right now.
He truly believes that this is the way ahead, and he would like to take Sarah and Kyle with him, you know? But we all have to make our own choices.
I'm not machine. I'm not man. I'm more.
What do you want from us?
I'm offering us a future together. As a family. No more widows and orphans.
What I love about Jason's performance is he didn't really go from being the all good guy to the all bad guy. He sort of kept a continuity there, where even as the villain, he still thinks he's doing the right thing. So John Connor dramatically goes from being our greatest hope to being our greatest threat. Inverting him so that he becomes the biggest threat is just dramatically fun. And it also feels like it's within Cameron's mythology, because one of the most brilliant things he did was that big inversion of taking the villain from the first film and making him the hero of the second film.
And we got. Great. One more.
We've had a lot of fun as a little troupe. Jason, it's funny. I mean, the demands of this shoot schedule have led to a situation where 2 Aussie guys in the same cast haven't even had a beer together yet, which I'm pretty embarrassed about, to be honest. But it's the truth, and I think that's just testament to how hard everyone's been working. It's been nuts, but it had to be in order to, you know, get this thing done and done right.
San Francisco because our film ends there, and we had to get some of the iconography that you only get there to go to the Golden Gate and go to the bunkers up in the hills above the Golden Gate. Oh, I love it. It's the way to do it. It becomes realer for everybody, and one less degree of pretend.
San Francisco has such a unique look and a unique quality of light.
One, drop!
And it was so helpful to actually be able to capture some of that. Gives scope and scale, so it really ties in what we did in New Orleans.
Yeah, how much would it cost to ship all the buses and motorcycles down to that end?
Because we were shooting in New Orleans in the summer. By the time we left, it was a little warm, to say the least. And then we take our entire crew to San Francisco, and we're all wearing sweaters and jackets because we're freezing.
Bang!
Fog and trying to shoot on the bridge.
We really wanted beautiful, pristine shots of the Golden Gate Bridge, and we got a lot of standing around looking at clouds going, wait, it's moving, turn the cameras on. Full beautiful shots that you see in the movie. But hey, it's real, and it gives atmosphere to the film.
Hi, you're towering.
So we'll start after my recognizing.
Alan Taylor is he's just so good. He's just so good.
Alan is, I don't understand how anybody, can keep all these balls in the air and have a clue about what's going on. And his sense of the big picture is so complete and so thorough.
He's a very smart man, and he knows story, and he knows actors, and he comes from some of the greatest TV ever done, and The Sopranos, and then on Game of Thrones, and Mad Men. He's been a pleasure to work with, like really.
The great thing about Alan Taylor is he doesn't get intimidated. A lot of times when I have a new director in the film, they don't know how far should they go with correcting me, or what should they say and how should they say it. And a lot of times directors would then go to my team or to my assistant, to someone and says, can you tell him, to tone it down a little bit or to bring it up a little bit, but not Alan Taylor, because he and I, we talked about it beforehand, and we said, look, if there's a scene that you don't like, then just tell me this doesn't work.
Ideally, on action, you start to walk. This time, it felt like you hesitated and you came in fast.
Oh, I see.
So I think coming not so hard. It's just basically you're walking forward.
Yeah, exactly. Okay, good. Yeah. From day one on, he was never intimidated, and he came right to me, and he always very gentlemanlike, may I remind you. He will get the point across very clear that we can do better than that. And then he put more energy in it, and he really is there to pump you up. It's a little bit almost like a shrink, that comes in there. Says, now, I remember that here yesterday we did this. Today we're doing it in a different way. And just think about when you do this scene in Conan, and then you crush the enemy. Just give me that drive.
Ready and go!
We are filming at NASA, where you need about a zillion passes to get in. The sets are as big as the moon.
What about that? Is it dangerous?
Polyalloy requires programming to take permanent form. Without the CPU, it is harmless.
The whole concept of world building and visual design was very much a close collaboration between myself and Neil, the production designer. There's a lot of discussion about how we would incorporate lighting into his sets, because there's so much technology and light.
Matt Smith plays the T-5000, which is something that we've never seen, which is very much the personification of Skynet walking the Earth.
For me, what's been exciting about this challenge is that it's the idea and the notion that I get to play someone that's a bad guy. And that's something that I've been really interested in. And we hope as the T-5000 develops that he's going to be, pure supervillain.
Why can't you just accept it? Because we're human.
Was shot by the second unit. People often ask me when I work on a movie like this, oh, was it all blue screen? Was it just,
Action.
And it's not all blue screen. I mean, there's, a huge amount of blue screen that we do, but there's also a tremendous amount of in-camera photography.
Action.
Well, if you're going to throw it down with anyone on the screen, you want it to be Schwarzenegger. I love that. I mean, he's a lot of fun,
Close up of him again.
Me again. And he's still in shape. I mean, he's a strong dude. And he knows what he's doing. I mean, he's got so much experience with fights and on film. Well, you only get to do this kind of action on a big budget film. I mean, lots of, suspension, ropes, pulleys and all that, but not just in a base. I mean, some of them have very complicated setups and ups and moves and, just use them just for a big wild swing, but just a little bit here and pull there.
And action!
It's just that great thing of trying to, so that each adds to the other, that it becomes, but still based in a reality, in a world that we've created that exists and we stick to the rules. And Arnold really talked a lot about the fighting and how Terminators fight and how, that him and Jim, particularly in the ones that they did together, it was a real big thing about the style of the way it operates. And I know we've all worked very hard to try and, be true to that and also keep that imagination and that thread going.
When you see the final product, no matter how much you've thought about what it's going to look like in the end, it's always, a jaw dropper to see a set that's been fully extended and executed and all the different CG elements that are in there. You're just like, wow.
Jumping up and down in a big pile.
So many people who came onto this movie came on because of their love of this franchise and wanted to, as they would all say, wanted to do it justice. And that absolutely traveled through post. Roger Barton is someone that we've worked with before and we will work with over and over and over again.
Our editor, Roger Barton, is amazing at what he does. He's come out of years and years in the Michael Bay School when it comes to sort of the weaving the story together and keeping the ball rolling. He's amazing. I've been learning a lot from him. We have areas where I feel like I know what I'm doing, but there's areas where I'm really grateful that he knows what he's doing.
I mean, it does feel to me like where they're transitioning is too late. I mean, if we're saying this haze over the lens is outside, and you see how it goes clear, right?
Yeah,
That's way too late.
That's way too late, yeah.
He's just such a pro, and he's got a team that comes with him that, it's not just one man in this kind of movie. It's, a whole army of people that are handling post for us, and they're doing a great job. There's urgency of getting them out, and I feel like we're going to come back and spend a lot of time with them doing that.
No, I agree with Phil.
Sarah! It's the only way.
That works for me.
Yeah.
Apparently. No.
I thought I could go even shorter, but let's just watch it.
Those are pretty much what they are. I mean,
yeah. That seems like the right.
Yeah, it seems right. I mean, you're like,
okay, good.
Credit to everybody who worked on this movie, from Alan to Roger to Yannick to Sherry, everybody who worked on this film in post. Best idea won. There really wasn't any ego brought to it. It really was about what is best for the movie. And whoever came up with that idea, it was like, great, okay, now how do we riff off of that? And yes, we all spent enough time in dark rooms with one another that it was just like, we're just gonna have a good time with this. It's taking up our lives, so we might as well just have a good time with this.
Terminator Genisys was very challenging from a visual effects point of view.
If you read any online commentaries, that people want to see the fully rendered future war. And so
the War Camp War was, for most parts, really sort of the principal photography. And the more we got involved in the sequence and the more we started working on it, the more it became clear that the premises was like, the more the better, where, almost nothing could fit into the image anymore, So it was about like making it as epic and as big as humanly possible.
The HKs and the T-800s are obviously canon from the first two movies. They were kind of updated and redesigned by our incredible visual effects team, which is really led by, Yannick Surs and Sherry Hansen. There were the Spider tanks, which were a new design, obviously, that Jim had actually developed very, very early on, but they were never actually able to bring them to fruition. It was really fun getting to actually sit, obviously in post for many, many months with the VFX team, obviously helping to develop and create these shots.
Yannick Surs, he's our visual effects supervisor, and he's probably got more experience at these movies than any of us, so we're all a little bit intimidated by him. He sort of keeps us on our toes. Frequently, he pushes back when we suggest things, and he's found solutions for things that we didn't find, and just the bar he sets for the finished visual effects is very, very high.
The prospect of the recreation of the young Arnold character.
Yannick Surs, who was our visual effects supervisor, and Sherry Hansen, who's our visual effects producer. Probably the first thing they ever said to us after they read the script was, the John Connor design is going to be challenging, but the young Arnold in Griffith Park, you're not going to get that until you rip it out of our hands the very last minute when this movie is locked.
It is already difficult enough, I guess, to create a human being digitally. It becomes even more difficult if that human being is like such an iconic figure as Arnold Schwarzenegger. Right from the start, we couldn't leave any stone unturned. So our whole process, how we did digital characters in the past, had to be evaluated and changed or invent new technologies wherever possible to just raise the bar. Second half and the second part is basically where the storyline deviates a little bit, and that's when young Arnold is basically finding himself like, being exposed or to an opponent, which is basically himself.
There's the entire process of youthifying, obviously, Guardian to turn our 67-year-old Arnold Schwarzenegger into a 50-year-old version of himself. Then we actually scoured the earth to find basically a bodybuilder by the name of Brett, who basically is the only human being on the planet who is almost as big as Arnold was when he was Mr. Universe.
It was also, the lens isn't quite right to be, correct enough and close enough to the original footage, and the framing isn't quite right. So we decided basically to go almost full CG.
The first process is you build the model, which gets you very, very close to where you want to be. But then at the end of it, you get into this uncanny area when you're looking at it to where you're 5% off, things will look right, but it's that glint behind the eyes, it's the way the light interacts with your skin, all of this incredibly finite detail that separates from something that feels actually alive and living and something that just feels dead. Well, the sculpt of his cheekbones feel a little bit better. His face feels just a little bit wider. And I think if we take that down, and so we really feel like, I think it'll accentuate the cheek line more, make the jawline more defined, which is so Arnold.
The review process with our clients started off, at the beginning mostly with us working together with Yannick, basically. And we sort of had regular review sessions with him 2 or 3 times a week where we went through the processes and the steps. With a character like the young Arnold, it was something that took pretty much our entire time from the start of the show when we first started working on this project all the way to the end, where we literally continuously built and refined this young Arnold character. Then further down the line, when it came more to the shot production, we started being more and more exposed to the filmmakers like Ellen Taylor, David Ellison, and Dana Goldberg. It was a highly creative process, but also a very time-consuming process for us to study and research like what Arnold it was like back then, effectively.
Terminator movies have a history of phenomenal practical effects and groundbreaking visual effects.
Cameron, when he makes movies, always pushes the envelope on what's possible.
Character as the bad guy, so we were betting the farm on this new technique, and it kind of just blew up.
To explore about how we could take it any further with the breaking down and the transformation of the form. We did a whole bunch of different fancy fluid sims and all the rest of it, but they actually, if anything, the more complex we got, the...
He was a great collaborator because every time I would start going here, Arnold would say, no, you need to go here. And the greatest thing about fitting Arnold was when I first met him, I was thinking, well, he's a little older than he was in the 80s. What are we going to do about his look and how to make him look formidable? Well, about a month later, I had another fitting with Arnold, and I walk in, and he says to me, I have the same measurements now as 1984. He had completely transformed himself in a month. And I said to him, have you been working out? And he looked at me and he said, no. Because the thing about Arnold is he's a great joker. And that's the thing I've discovered about him. He will, as they say, really take the piss out of you. Okay, we're looking at Los Angeles culture from the 90s and what would have happened before an apocalypse. And then I started looking at all guerrilla fighters in the world today. And what do guerrilla fighters wear when they're fighting? You wear what you can find, and you use it in a way that works for you. So for example, I've got arm pieces that are California license plates. We took tires and repurposed them into arm pieces and shoulder pieces. He's got an interesting, very blocky shield. Come look at this one.
That's awesome.
He's got some paintball. Actually, he's got motocross armor on. And we made all of these pieces. So it's a really interesting group of guerrilla fighters because you've got 350 people that essentially every single person is dressed differently.
On this day, we take back our planet!
Then we have the John Connors and the Kyle Reeses of that world. They are the elite officers. And so what's happened is you think if a community is at war, well, you're going to take the most highly functional things and you're going to put energy into that and supporting the elite fighters and give them the cargo pants and the things that you found that might be the most highly functional. So what we did was, together with Diana Burton and Props, we built chest pieces that were good for plasma rifle hits. And then we built a lot of other pieces, you know, shoulder pieces, elbow pieces, knee pieces. And then based on the kind of fighting that they're doing and then the weapons that they have, their outfits modify according to that. This one is actually John Connor. You can see his initials, JC, on it. He has this kind of very futuristic looking protective shoulder piece. There's a secret that I'm gonna let you in on, which is that my crew discovered car mats. If you start cutting up your car mats, you'll land up with some great armor that works really well for camera. And if you can see the back of it, you know, it's been cut up and then riveted together, and the rivets have been aged and made rusty. This is also a car mat that had a piece of metal in it, but when you patina it, sand it, put it through the cement mixer. If you look up close here, you can really see what a cement mixer does, because the rubber has gotten patinaed in the crevices and there's like a white dust, and it really starts to look like it's gone through a post-apocalyptic nuclear war.
Especially in this movie, function was really important. You know, each and every one of them, to their own extent, is a soldier. And then you have Arnold, who's a machine. And so, yes, you want them to look good, to say the least, but anything they wear, they're going to wear for a reason. And that was something Susan latched onto, you know, within moments of saying, yes, I desperately want to do this movie because I love science fiction and I want to do a big science fiction film. And she just blends that beautifully. Beauty and functionality. And we were thrilled with the results. And so was Arnold, and he's none too easy to please.
We're at Legacy Effects. We're here in the process of building Terminators. And once again, for me, this is a really neat thing because my first big movie, the first movie that I count, was the first Terminator. I've worked on all of them, and so it's quite an honor to be involved again with this. So what's pretty neat is to see the evolution of the technology that has gone into particularly creating these endoskeletons. And the rapid prototyping process and sculpting, you know, digitally in the computer has given us a sense of symmetry and machine preciseness that is so different than how it was originally done when it was all sculpted by hand in clay, then molded, then all the pieces taken out, painstakingly hand sanded and redone. And, you know, you look back at it fondly because it was such an iconic character. but the precision and the cleanness and how we've created these things now is really remarkable.
When it comes to practical and creature effects, there is nobody that does a better job in our industry than Legacy. And the amount of love, respect, and brilliance that they brought to the project has been all of their work. Literally, there was no question to us that they had to be a part of this.
We were updating some of the look of some of our creatures. The T-800 endoskeleton is adapted a little bit, and they were so familiar with Arnold, which is a big part of it. He was the first fully body scanned actor, I think, way back when they were doing it last time, so they still have that around. And just the use of prosthetics on him was always kind of flawless, and a lot of talk about how much can you damage Guardian, how much can you damage Arnold, you hang on to the humanity in this creature. They already had a vocabulary for that because they've been through it before.
This is the model that we received from client before any process. It's pretty elaborately modeled as is, but there's still a lot of stuff that is required to finish it to make it a viable, tangible object. This is the chest of the T-800, and it's basically broken down into logical parts for assembly. All the different colors represent the different parts that we have grown and how we've actually broken it apart for the process of building.
The final endoskeleton is made out of various kinds of epoxies and urethanes and rubbers, but that stuff is not self-supporting as far as strength goes. So we had to put a skeleton inside of that that's mostly made out of precision machined aluminum. This would be the spine, the neck. This is where the skull of the endoskeleton goes. And this is one of his arms. We don't know whether they're gonna ever be used as puppets or not, but we like to set them up so that they could potentially be puppets, so all of these individual joints can lock off like a traditional rod puppet so that it could be performed on set if it needed to be.
So this is a special build for a stunt mask, but we did the full endoskeleton same way. Most of it was 3D printed in-house. I have up on the monitor right now the skeleton. It was real nice and satisfying actually being able to print something like this.
We're standing in the model shop. We do all the finish work on the rapid prototype parts that come off the beds. We do all the finishing of the parts as far as sanding the parts, sanding all the lines off the parts, prepping them for the molding process. And then once all these castings are done, they come back into here and the guys start doing a final assembly. And that's what Toy is doing here. He's taking the skull to the T-800 and he's cleaned it all up and he's putting all the final little details back in, including the eyes and all the parts that are needed to create this final piece. Nick is doing final assembly here on the arm. I would say there was approximately 50 pieces to this arm. So you can see here the fingers are articulated, positionable, and yet they're quite flexible, you can see here, even though they look metallic. And the wrist is also articulated, moved from side to side.
What's kind of neat about this one is that, all the other endos, from part 1, 2, and 3, all those were all chrome plated, and this one is just a paint treatment, which I thought was pretty neat. From head to toe, every little nook and cranny that you see in here has to get a black wash on it. And you can tell from where I did do it already, where it looks darker than where I haven't done it on the chest, which is real bright. And then wipe it off and just let the black settle into the lines. And that just pulls out, all the detail. You get to see all the cool lines and all the nice shapes and forms a lot better when you have a black line defining everything for you.
Wanted to introduce you guys to the T-800 endoskeleton. This is one of 3 endos that we're going to have on the show. This being the hero. This one will be mostly for lighting for these actual CG walking characters. But every now and then, I'm sure we'll get a shot off where we have an insert piece or something of that nature. So that's why we wanted to try to make them as articulated as possible. So if we had to do an insert shot of an arm coming in or something, we have nice bearings so we can have easy movement in the waist. And the head has a ball and socket joint, so we can get all kind of movement out of this. This one's mostly epoxy and some urethane parts. Our stunt one over here, which the guys are hard at work on, has to be a little more pliable. This one's foam. That's a 280 foam. It still has the aluminum armature, so we still get the same articulation out of all the joints. It just doesn't have the rigidity of the Hero one. So if it falls out of the truck, which it's going to do in the film, it's not going to shatter.
And door!
Basically, what we're doing is the rest of the crew here is catching this one up to the same level as this. So when they're done, you won't be able to tell them apart.
Then we're doing an old 1984 Arnold recreation of him.
This is all sculpted traditionally the same way in clay, the whole body. It took me about 4 weeks to do. I got as much reference of Arnold as I could, and I sculpted it over a scan of Arnold from, I think, 2002, 2003. So he was in his 50s, so I took that, which gave me all the proportions of Arnold, and then from photo reference, I had to go back in and bulk him back up as he was in 1983. After, I think, he had just finished his last Mr. Olympian, so he was pretty buff at that point. So it was going back in, making all the proportions, all the muscles there, but then going in and mapping all the veins in and making sure it's as accurate as we could make it. This is a sculpture done that we actually did from Terminator 4 that we reworked for this new one. This was Arnold back in 1984. This is based on old life casts that we had and photographs and stuff. And then this is a life cast of Arnold that was taken a few months ago at age 67. So I think he's 38 here and 67 here. It's soft silicone to a certain degree, and then it's rigid foam inside. And then in the stomach, it's deeper, so it can flex and move, and everything can move around naturally. Like we have the neck, and on the day when this is like when it's dead Terminator, we'll pose this in whatever pose we want, and we can lock it off. It took us about 2-3 days to put the endoskeleton inside the head and the chest wounds and all the different various wounds, and then all the hair. The wig is all hand-tied from here back on lace, and then the whole front edge, as you can see, is all punched in one hair at a time. See how fine that is? And then styled and cut. And then all the eyebrows are punched, and the eyelashes are punched and curled as well. I did the whole body, and then the legs are based off the same mold. So I think we're doing 12 pair of legs that are gonna have a frozen look, and they're gonna be hanging in the factory.
I'm working on Terminator legs here, and we're casting them out of Platsil Gel 10, which is a platinum silicone, non-toxic, and it has been tinted to look like skin. It's a 2-part silicone that when added together, you'll have a pot life or a working time of about 5 minutes, and it has a very flesh-like feel to it, which makes it perfect for using for legs.
You brush them in a layer at a time, and then you build it up to the point where you can put the steel armature in so that it can move, and then you backfill that with a foam so that it's got a nice squishy natural feel to it. We can do about 1 a day. It takes about probably 6 hours maybe. When the piece comes out of the mold, it obviously has a seam line on it, and our job is just to erase that so it doesn't look fake. The hardest thing to fool is obviously the human eye. If there's a few little dotted line of a seam, the mind actually fills it in. You always see the line, so you really got to work hard to confuse it and hide it. We're just mixing up some material and putting it over the edge and smoothing it out. And then once we've done that, then we go back over and try and match the texture that the sculptors have done.
So what's going on right now is we need to make a stunt mask that looks like Arnold. So we scanned Arnold some time ago, we've cleaned up that scan, and now we've prepped the geometry to be 3D printed. I can open up the hood to give a little bit more insight. So it's printing right now face down at a 16 micron level, which is smaller than one of my piece of hairs. With every layer that goes back and forth, that's one of the layers of the geometry building it up. And as it goes on, those lights cure it to bring it to a hard state. And then once it gets 3D printed, it'll be handed over to a makeup artist/sculptor to bring out even more detail in it. In this scenario, Arnold's gonna take about 29 hours to print his full face. So we have just about 29 hours left. It pretty much just started. So tomorrow afternoon, we'll have Arnold in our hands.
And we're also doing lots of prosthetic appliances. This is a big part of the Terminator movies, always have been.
So here we have a map to what the makeup is eventually going to be like. There's 5 different stages to the Arnold makeup. In each new stage, there's anywhere between 3 and 6 new appliances added. So he starts out with the basic Arnold Guardian. Then he'll get a couple of new scars. Then we go to phase B, new scars being added. Stage C, looks like there's 9 more scars being added, all the way up to the point where he becomes the really disfigured Terminator. This is a glue that we glue appliances on the face with, and what we're doing here is we're making a self-sticking appliance. So we're taking this liquefied glue and turning it in front of a little bit of heat and air for hours and creaming it to almost like a peanut butter paste. We figured out with our acrylic colors and some flocking the proper color to match to Arnold Schwarzenegger's skin tone. So once this is a nice thick peanut butter, we'll take this and put it into molds that we have outside that I'll show you now. So what Ken's doing here is he's just spatulating the prostate into the mold, making sure there's no air bubbles, getting all the detail captured. And once the prostate's in there, a nice even level, he's gonna take the acetate plastic, he's burping out all the airs, and he's gonna create a blend edge that'll blend down to Arnold's face. Now the next step is this is going to have to go in the freezer for about an hour and chill. As you can see here, we have dozens of pieces that are in the works. This one's ready to come out. So once these are frozen nice and solid, we carefully peel the mold off. And here's the appliance, but it'll never really go translucent. So what we have to do is we take this appliance, we put it into a convection oven or dehydrator for days. Then once it comes out of the oven, it'll go into our box and it'll get shipped to set for application.
When I look back to what we did back then with a small group of people, it's a classic film. But technically, you keep getting better, and the bar keeps getting raised, and so the standards keep going up. And it's very photoreal now, the way the appliances are being done. And then what's genius about it now, what we couldn't do back then, was the blending of the CG with the prosthetics. With prosthetic appliances, you can only build up onto the skin. You can't take away. So what's fantastic, and we did this actually back on T3 for the first time, was removing from the actor, which you can do, utilizing the combination of CG and the appliances. So it's bringing to bear all the state-of-the-art tricks of the trade to make this movie really special.
First, going back to Terminator, it all starts with James Cameron. I mean, for me, he is simply the greatest filmmaker alive. The movie was so far ahead of its time, and the thing that I actually really loved about it was that it wasn't just a great science fiction movie, it wasn't just a great man versus machine movie, it was actually a love story at the center of it.
At the heart of this great science fiction film is this real emotional story. I still remember watching the original Terminator and thinking way back then, oh wow, this is a love story. It's this incredible science fiction movie, and Arnold Schwarzenegger is this killer robot, and it's all incredibly cool. But for me, the movie always boiled down to the line, I came across time for you, Sarah.
There was no comparable female action, not even like a hero, an archetype. I mean, I think that's the thing that Jim does just so beautifully, is he taps into this warrior goddess archetype. And Sarah was so, for me anyway, I just remember finding it a very revolutionary experience creatively.
For me, one of the things when we actually did get the rights to Terminator was, okay, why now? Because if you're going to do a newer version of a movie like this, you shouldn't just do it just because you bought the rights. It's how do you make it relevant? And for us, the why now has always been the technology.
You know, in the original film, Skynet had to bash through your front door, but today it's completely different. We line up days before the new iPhone comes out to basically go get the Apple Store to actually, you know, invite Skynet in through the front door. We're constantly giving away our privacy. We can't live without our phone.
If you look around a restaurant, how many people are actually talking to one another and how many people are looking down at devices? How much of our lives are absolutely dependent upon devices? And that is what Genisys is. Genisys is the moment of that tipping point.
A lot of people have asked us, there was no version of Terminator without Arnold Schwarzenegger. I mean, Arnold is the Terminator. It's his most iconic role.
But yes, it was incumbent upon us to try to figure out a way that you don't feel like you're just seeing him do a repeat of any of the other movies. And that was really important to all of us. We wanted to be very respectful of Arnold, and we wanted to be very respectful of the character that he created. I mean, it's a legacy character.
30 years ago, we started with that franchise, and I did not think then, when we did the first Terminator, there ever will be a sequel. But now, all of a sudden, here's the fifth. And not only the fifth, but 30 years later, you get asked to come back and to be the Terminator again. So this was really a fantastic kind of news to me, and I was honored that I was offered the role again. I'm still the Terminator 30 years later, so that was really extraordinary.
We had been writing a different project for David and Dana, David Ellison at Skydance. And as we were finishing the first pass on that, they had been putting together the rights with Megan Ellison for doing a new Terminator film. I think they had talked to Laeta a few times, in which she kept saying no. Yeah.
I did not feel comfortable. I didn't feel comfortable given my relationship with the person who had created the universe. It felt like, you know, mildly sacrilegious.
And then you changed your mind?
Well, I finally ended up talking to Jim about whether or not he thought I should do it. And he was incredibly supportive in a way that only someone with that level of creative generosity can be. You know, it was a world that he had left behind, and he felt that I should, if I wanted to go ahead and do it, that it would not be anything that he felt would hurt the franchise.
The writer's a good friend of mine, Laeta Kalogridis, and she has a writing partner, Patrick, that she works with now. But she and I have written together in the past. So she kind of asked me to, you know, unofficially advise, you know, and I said, look, the thing that's most clear to me is, I think the Terminator, there's a way to explore his character that could actually be fun and open it up more while still giving fans what they want. And it has to do with this idea that he's not really a robot. He's a cyborg. He has a robotic endoskeleton, but he's the org part of cyborg is an organic organism. So he's got living human tissue over the outside. And so that would age. And so the idea that Arnold now, as a 60-something, is playing the same character that he played back when he was in his late 30s, or mid-30s, I guess, is perfectly plausible in that world if you buy into the conceits of that world.
You know, the construction of the story, it wasn't about, you know, creating a reboot. It wasn't about creating something that nullified the films that have gone before. It was about creating a story that could work in concert with what happened before and how we were going to continue on in different directions.
And we also started from a place of, for us, a Terminator universe is always going to have fundamental aspects to it. In this case, it's always going to have a Sarah Connor, it's always going to have a Kyle Reese, it's always going to have a John, and it's always going to have a Terminator. They just may not resemble the versions that you've seen previously. And, you know, that did lead ultimately to what is the big twist in our movie.
Push the story that far at that point?
Up to the moment we were going to have a meet with Skydance and pitch them the ideas that we were beginning to germinate. That morning, kept thinking, what do you do with the savior of the world? How do you take him on a journey that is unexpected? And what, from Skynet's point of view, is the thing that always trips Skynet up?
That is the most important part to me, is if you are Skynet and you are an AI and a learning machine,
you realize that because of the loops of time travel, time travel loops and loops and loops and loops, and so at some point in that loop, Skynet figures out the thing that always makes it lose is John Connor. And if I want to win, well, I need one of those. And if I can't make one of those, I will take it, and I will co-opt it, and I will make it be mine. So thought of that in the morning. You know, it's one of those things where you're in the shower, and you're like, oh, what if we do that? I remember calling Laeta, so I have this crazy idea. Oh, yeah, and Laeta was like, well, I don't know if we could do that. That's what I was. We had talked about maybe infecting Kyle and have that infection sort of going out over the period of the movie, and it's sort of a gradual thing. And the call ends, and we haven't decided if it's going to be that way or not. And
I can't believe you're actually going to tell this story.
And then we go into the pitch meeting, and we're sitting there, and Laeta starts pitching, and
lo and behold,
I have no idea which version she's going to pitch. And suddenly she pitches, and then John is, the villain is co-opted by Skynet and they were like, oh, that's it. And it was just like, oh crap, I guess we're doing that one.
And really fun to explore what the emotional repercussions of that would be.
There's phenomenal action in Terminator movies, and we plan to live up to that promise. But a lot of people can shoot action. Not a lot of people can really get true character-driven performances in the middle of, again, a giant science fiction film.
I love and worship at the altar of Game of Thrones. To me, it simply redefined what you can do on television. And Alan Taylor was a massive part of those first few seasons.
You're never approached directly about things. I was finishing my last movie, and I came in to have a meeting with Skydance, who had been developing it for years with Megan Ellison. And we had a general meeting, and we talked about a bunch of things, and they mentioned Terminator, but I never thought they were mentioning it for me. And then we had a meeting a week later, and it was all about Terminator. And at that point, it was equal parts, oh my God, excitement, and also, oh my God, how on earth, do I step up to that? Knowing that Arnold was going to be in this and that he's aged and he's a different guy now, the excitement for me was to really embrace that and say, we're not going to brush that into the table. We're not going to pretend. We're going to explore, what does it mean for a machine to be trapped in a timeline with no access to future technology? What's going to happen to that machine over time? That was the key to finding a new thing to do with Arnold in that role. It's a source of humor in the movie. It's also a source of pathos. Your heart goes out to him, and so that was exciting. The first creative sort of teammate I reached for was Kramer Morgenthau, who'd been my DP on various things. We met on Boardwalk Empire. I took him into Game of Thrones, and then we did Thor together, so there was sort of a shorthand and a camaraderie there, and I love his work, and I think he can make things look epic and beautiful.
The pre-production process on this picture was tremendously involved, and huge amount of moving parts, working very closely with Neil, the production designer, and figuring out the places where practical photography leaves off and virtual photography takes over.
Neil Spisak came on as our production designer, and he and I had never worked with him before, but we just sort of met people, and I loved the way he talked about the worlds.
That's how much space we have. I know you included the pillar. That's Big Bear. But what I like about this one,
The entire concept of really turning a ruined LAX into the opening sequence where the Future War took place was entirely Neil's idea. And he came in with these phenomenal renderings that he had done of it, and it was just like kind of all of our jaws hit the ground, and we're like, this has to be the guy for the movie.
I think our helicopter should be gray.
Oh, this is a Future War stuff?
Future War, yeah.
And he had some real challenges involving things that had existed, like the hunter-killers and the spider tanks, but making them cool for our time. And we're creating our time displacement device, which has been referred to but never seen before.
Kramer, of course, likes
I like Kramer has
the darker.
two ideas. One, when they come back to the third act, it'll probably look like this.
One of the major points of the design of this movie is that we travel through different realities, and finding a way to keep them separated and to make it clear as to which reality you're in at which time. So the 1980s is a more saturated palette, more colorful palette. And the 2017 will be very real and yet modern. There is a pretty strong color control in terms of its gray palette. So there's a sort of cleanness to it, I guess, especially because of so much of it being about Cyberdyne.
Neil came in from moment one, and same as Kramer, with such a respect for the Cameron films. You know, so many of the people who worked on this movie felt such a responsibility to want to live up to those films. The look, the palettes, you know, sort of the tones, but we have to stand on our own 2 feet.
Obviously, there were massive set builds on this movie. Every single time you walked onto one of his sets, they were jaw-dropping. Neil literally rose to the challenge. The film would not be what it is without the amazing work that he did.